In this month's First Person Podcast, episode 26, I sat down with Matthew, Eve, and Jason, and we talked about Dream Daddy. We talked about fatherhood and the fetishization of gay men in this game. We also talked about queer utopias, representation, and LGBTQ romance publishing, especially in terms of tropes. In particular, we wanted to focus on the impact of this game that focuses on queer characters, without the focus being their sexuality, and what that means for games, and the writing that goes on with queer characters in games in the future. I'm Betsy Bray. You can find me on Twitter at Betsy Bray.
I'm Matthew Perks. You can find me on Twitter at Perks_Matthew.
I'm Eve Duchesne, and I don't have Twitter.
It's a good move.
I'm Jason. You can find me at Luddick Scribbler.
And if you're looking for anything and all things FPS, you can find FPS's Twitter at FPS Weekly. And you can also find us on Facebook as First Person Scholar. So, it's February. That means we do a romance game. February is my favorite. So we've talked about a few dating sims and romance games and stuff like that in the past, but we've never gotten into queer dating sims and all of the fun stuff that entails. In particular, we decided to focus on Dream Daddy because it's one that's worth talking out. I guess starting off, how familiar are y'all with dating sims? You played a lot of them, not a lot of them, visual novel games, like where are we at?
I played Mass Effect 3.
It can be as queer as you want it.
That's the extent of my experience.
Well, now you've played a bit more, but...
Now I've played a lot more.
It begins.
I don't really play dating sims, but I read a lot of LGBTQ romance, and I've basically read this game before.
Strange.
Wonderful. And I know visual novels.
Yeah, also not a lot of dating sims. Jumping on the bandwagon ones, like I played How to Fuck Boyfriend and Dream Daddy. So
yeah!
Like, date pigeons, date dads.
Now I'm thinking about like pigeon dads, and it is right out. That is too far.
I don't know. There's a very kind of niche romance monster erotica going on, so there could be lots of stuff going on there too.
That's true.
Not that I've read any of it.
Well,
at all.
We don't shame here, but
only Chuck Tingle, which is just all
the most monstrous of romance.
Most monstrous of all erotica.
DLC content for which game?
Oh no. I've talked about this sort of thing on podcasts a lot. If you're a regular listener to FPS, you're like, Betsy, stop talking. But I'm always talking. Dream Daddy, I played for this podcast, Tofu Boyfriend, or I'm bad with the pronunciation.
I think How to Fuck Boyfriend.
How to Fuck Boyfriend. Yeah. Gosh, we did Mystic Messenger last year. That was an entirely new, horrible thing for me. I enjoyed the game, but the horribleness was real time. So I was like, I missed a call from my anime boyfriend! And I was like, my whole day was ruined. And it was just like really stressful to actually try to maintain a relationship in real time because I'm like, that's not what I'm here for. And, just a couple here and there. I really want to play, Dungeon Boyfriend, the one where you go through...
Oh, Boyfriend Dungeon.
Boyfriend Dungeon. There we go. Yeah.
Shout out to Kitbox Games.
Yes.
Yeah, in Montreal.
Exactly. I haven't gotten to it yet because, game.
It's not out yet. That's why.
Oh, well, that's a good reason.
Yeah.
It's on the to-do list. I'm decently practiced in it, but by no means an expert. And I think Dream Daddy was definitely the first one I played that was like actually intending to be queer.
Is that to say that all the other ones had queer subplots, or?
It was a add your own queer kind of thing, and
I
don't know with pigeons, like we don't know
how they identify.
I don't know how they identify. We're not here to talk about pigeons. We can talk about pigeons. Most dating sims are really, really straight. They're really, really straight, and the entire context is, you're here in this situation where you have a, potential harem of men or women who are interested in you, and they're all here to be romanced by you, right? We get that with our nice cul-de-sac and Dream Daddy, but I gotta start with the best question. Who did you date first?
Brian.
Brian, really?
All about Brian.
All about Brian. Hot damn.
I was like very cold to Craig at first, but he really grew on me.
Oh,
That's my daddy. Yeah.
That's my Dream Daddy. Jason, who did you date?
I also dated Craig. Yeah, I went all the way with Craig.
Ooh.
Yeah, the baby got to me.
Oh, God, Hazel.
It was mostly for the baby. I mean, no, it wasn't, but...
I couldn't help it. I dated Robert first because I am trash.
Mhm.
He was close. He was close.
I know.
I tried to date Robert first.
You slept with him, didn't you?
I did not. I said, this isn't working. I need to leave. And then he still dumped me.
Oh,
Yeah.
Matthew, I'm sad.
It was a lot to take in.
I slept with Robert, and then I restarted that portion, and then just continued on without going to the room with him.
I actually did the exact same thing the first playthrough. Well, I mean, not exact. I did. I went home with him, and then I was like, I'm the worst dad. I feel really bad. I didn't know I would stay overnight. I thought I would just like walk in, do my jam, and leave. I'm like, I would never leave my daughter home alone without telling. Like, this is unacceptable. So I felt like a bad dad, and I restarted.
Well, you get the achievement, bad dad.
Yeah, it made it very clear to me I did something bad, but I also felt it. It wasn't just the Chivo, I swear. But then I restarted, and I went in, and I said, wait, no, and walked away, and then we dated. So how many other dads did you all date?
Okay, so I'm somewhat biased, and I was just like, I just wanted to go with Brian, and I just went through that, and then I could easily see myself falling into this for like hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to see what the other ones were like, so I just basically read summaries of the other ones, and I almost went with Damien if only for the fact that there was the kind of elliptical hints that he was trans, because I wanted to see how that played out, but I could not stand his character.
Oh, okay. I also dated Damien because he was very extra and I was very into that. And also attempted to date Robert and then read summaries of all the other ones because, I mean,
You do what
who
you
has
gotta
time
do.
to date all these dads?
I did. I dated all the dads.
You did?
I did.
Wow.
First it was Robert, then it was Matt, then it was Craig, then it was Hugo, then it was Damien, then it was Brian, then it was Joseph.
You made a list.
I did.
Of your
You
progress.
remembered the order. That's very good.
I know what I'm about, all right.
So, having gone through all of the dads, which romance option was your favorite?
Craig.
He takes you camping. That's nice.
I really loved Matt, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed Hugo's. And Damien's was fun, and I was glad because, I caught the hints, and like we talked about it before the podcast here, and it's confirmed that he is trans. So I thought that was spectacular, and like it was fun dating Robert. Joseph can go right to hell. I had trouble understanding Brian. Like, maybe I'm just not a dad, and I don't understand dad rivalry.
I loved the rivalry thing. I don't know what it was, but like maybe it's because he was the first one we also met. I think. Yeah. Okay, so the first one I met, and part of me was just like, okay, first one, let's just go. Because again, I'm used to romances where you don't really get the option. The first person you meet, the meet cute in the first chapter, that's your person.
It was a hell of a meet cute too.
I know. I also just love the competing thing because I kept basically picking the most aggressive option to respond to him because it just made my night.
Yeah.
That the most aggressive option, please.
How many eggplants did you get for that?
That was my favorite part of the whole thing. I just wanted to make it rain eggplants.
Make it rain eggplants. That's the title of the podcast.
Please. Because why else would I want to be the most aggressive thing?
I know.
When I'm playing these games.
There was a distinction between eggplants and hearts, right? And
Yeah.
it depended on which
Or
answer
squirts.
you chose?
Yeah, because it was like a
Oh.
neutral, like, love kind of thing.
Well, and there's also a dislike,
Yeah.
which I found a few times on accident.
Yeah, the dark smoke one.
Yeah, and I was just
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry.
I made you fart dark smoke.
We gotta talk about the eggplants with the sweat now.
Oh, I just assumed it was squirting.
Oh, well, I mean,
Perhaps that's just me reading.
well, I mean,
too much
it's
into
the
this.
emoji is sweat,
The
right?
emoji is sweat, but it
But it's
implies something else.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
good.
like the first time I had that was when you meet Brian, because of course I was, flirty option, and he was digging that, and I was like, I love this game's eggplant usage.
On point.
Well, it was
Tasteful.
like a surprise as well because like I remember I was streaming the game when I first played through it and I didn't know anything about it. And so I'm like sitting there playing with my friends and then all these eggplants are coming out and we all know what that means. And it's all very surprising and very sexual and very like, oh, like eggplants. Like that's how you feel.
Yeah.
I love that you play this with friends in the room because I deliberately waited until my partner left and took over his computer and played it so I could have this gigantic screen and just the house to myself.
Nice.
And then just the most aggressive options. Eggplants everywhere.
I also played this game in private.
It's a private game. It's a very private experience.
It definitely reveals some things about yourself that maybe you don't want people
Yeah.
to know.
If I had been playing around other people, I probably wouldn't have gone home with Robert immediately. But What's the worst that could happen? Oh, a sad thing. He's mad at me. Well, he's not mad at you. He just assumes that you're only in it for booty, and, you know, he just kind of puts you in that
He is
box.
correct.
Well, in that case, yes, he was.
Yeah, he has great shoes. I'm in it for the booty as well.
I was saying, are we going to talk about all the puns in this? Because
The
There were a
dad
lot.
jokes. Oh
Yeah.
my god, the dad jokes made my life. I was so baffled and happy about the whole thing. Pun after pun, it was amazing.
I already figured I was in a fantastical universe because all
the
of the
hot
dads
dads
lived
live
on a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
But then the dialogue kind of confirmed. I was like, no one is constantly this on.
Yeah, the writing was definitely like spectacular and definitely like created this literal whole like fantasy world. And it's like, where do I go to be here? Like,
There's a wonderful coffee shop, and look at this nice dive bar, and all of these pretty men in this cul-de-sac that all want to date me.
that is a trope that comes up in LGBT romance all the time.
Yeah.
Where, like, I love this one lesbian author, Radcliffe, and effectively she used to be a surgeon.
Mhm.
And so every single book that she writes takes place in a hospital, and everybody on staff is a lesbian. And I'm just like, I love this hospital.
I want to go to that
I want to go to this hospital. I'm
Sign
going to
me
break
up.
my arm.
Yeah,
And
like,
go to this hospital.
where is it? Like, let me.
But I love that effectively they're creating kind of fantasy spaces, these
Mhm.
mythic realms where, yes, it takes place in the States, and they'll even like drop the state that they're in, but this
Yeah.
hospital obviously doesn't exist. But I like the negotiation of you don't have to talk about homophobia
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah, that was a huge relief as I was playing Dream Daddy. It was just like I can have this nice place where I can just have this sort of fantasy space where nobody's going to look at me twice, and like I'm trying to think of how to word this exactly. None of the dads give the other dads any crap for the fact that they have children and the implied past heteronormativity that goes with that. There's no, you've been with a woman, gross, you know?
There's even the option at
Yeah.
the beginning of the game with
Exactly.
is your partner who's dead a man or a woman?
Yep.
And that was nice.
Did you adopt and
Yeah.
or not? And like you can still pick to have your partner be a woman and have adopted.
Mhm.
I like that you had that option, but it does erase some realities of tensions in the queer community. We'll put it that way.
They even integrate the kind of fantasy space where you don't even have to deal with transphobia because, again,
Yeah.
you just have the kind of, you can pick the daddy that is wearing the binder in the avatar screen, and then you can have a relationship with Damien, and there's no kind of gynophobia going on where
Yeah.
it's just like you don't have to negotiate that, where you
Mhm.
often do in LGBT dating scenes where there's
Yeah.
this kind of people draw arbitrary lines around what's below somebody's pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is the line, is the pants.
It's the pants.
The pants is
Although sometimes the binder
Um,
thing comes in, but
right. Yeah. Yeah.
effectively you just have people focusing far too much on genitals.
it can be a bit like sanitizing though, I found. I felt there could have been more representativity of like actual like queer conflict in these kinds of
Yeah,
stories
yeah.
told. And so it would have been nice to see kind of the stories and the characters kind of explore that a little bit more. It was this beautiful fantasy world where these things weren't problems, when in reality, these problems do still exist.
Mhm.
And especially when you're looking at queer media, you look for that kind of representativity to kind of see something of your own struggles in that media as well, and feel like, oh, there are like good outcomes to these kinds of things.
Yeah, that was the one issue of it I had with it, which was this kind of ahistorical nature of the
Mhm.
entire game, where it's
Yeah.
like you have no idea what time period this is at, other than the fact they have cell phones and dad book.
Yeah, dad book.
Dad book, amazing. I want this. Yeah, no, there's this ahistoricity where it's like there's no such thing as Stonewall, there's no such thing
Mhm.
as Prop 8, I'm just assuming they're in the States or something like effectively, or the bathroom
Yeah.
bills. There's nothing like that touched upon, and
Yeah.
and maybe that's fun for the fantasy space dreamscape kind of utopian, but at the same time there's a way in which you can face those issues and fold it into your daily existence and not have it be a snafu, but still pay homage to history.
Yeah.
History's good, basically.
It is, and I found it a little bit sanitized too, and I get like it's good to have both kinds of representation. It's good to have games where you can just
Justify yourself.
yeah, you walk
Or where-
you walk into the barbecue and it's all options. You don't have to go through the awkward is he not gay thing.
It can be fun though, every once in a while.
Yeah, if it's done right. But I mean,
Yeah.
there's never a question. Everything's an option, right? And that's so incredibly rare in video games in general, where it's actually like you meet a man. If you're a man, it's good. That's incredibly rare. Typically, it's the other way. I don't know. Anyways.
I thought it was interesting the way in which those choices weren't even available to choose. The narrative or the options wouldn't allow you to ask those questions at all.
Yeah.
Even like, how do you feel about your history or any of these things?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was this kind of interesting fantasy space of what if homophobia never had been a thing? What kind of fantastical utopia would have arisen from this? But yeah, I do think that there would be an interesting place to have a game in which you do actually confront the idea of you're at the shopping mall and you question whether you should hold hands.
Yeah, because I think it's different people have different levels of comfort, and it's all between you and your partner and what you are and are not comfortable with. And there just wasn't any of that kind of negotiation, which is a valuable piece of relationship building. I think like the biggest tension of visibility in a public space was in Hugo's relationship, because you're at a wrestling ring and he doesn't want his students to know he's into wrestling. But you can just flat out make out with them in front of the students, and that's fine. So being gay is fine, but wrestling, no. Like that's unprofessional. We're definitely taught the other way. I've been told to try to act straighter when I'm trying to be professional and things like that, which is just bullshit. But I gotta say, one of my favorite parts of this utopia is definitely the fact there's just this huge goth castle in this cul-de-sac. Like, that's actually one of my favorite things. I will say I like Damien. I liked that he is so extra. But again, just kind of sanitized. I caught the binder comment and I was like, oh, cool. And then it was just like, never talked about.
Yeah, and it had to be confirmed like through like a fan basically talking to the writer of that character and being like, is this what this is supposed to signal? Does this signal that Damien's like a trans man? And they confirmed that.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have that kind of identity and maybe something happen there, like actually in the actual game. But it was one of those balancing things where it's like you have this nice utopia, but also we don't get to talk about these issues that are important.
Nightmare Daddy DLC.
Yeah, no kidding. I have such conflicted feelings about everything, because on one hand, I'm not trans, so I couldn't tell you if it is or isn't a relief to not have to do that rigmarole. Like, maybe that's a well-needed space to just be able to have this romance and be recognized in that space at the same time.
I can take a guess at some of these because I've read a lot of LGBT, including trans romances, which are, like, if you're talking about, first of all, romance is huge, and then you have LGBT, which is, like, super small in this huge heterosexual romance game, and the lesbian romances and the gay romances shall never meet and never touch.
They do not.
They have very different, like, it's fascinating because effectively you have a whole bunch of different writers writing gay romance, but you really only have lesbians writing lesbian romances. So there's just kind of strange authorship, and I think probably this comes up with the players in this as well, like the playing dynamics with this.
Yeah.
Some gay men obviously are writing gay romances, and some gay men are playing this, but I don't think that's the main demographic doing either. So
I really want to talk about this.
And when you're talking about bisexuality and you're talking about trans identity, you have this even more kind of who's allowed to write these stories, who is allowed to embody these narratives, and there's this kind of very strange, well, do you have to make the transness a thing?
Yeah.
I actually like the way in which they revealed it because it's so subtle that I actually missed when you're creating a character that the tank top signaled a binder.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I'm the trans scholar and I'm just like, I don't know what it like just goes over my head at this point.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I would have picked that, but whatever. And I just went through and I played my cis daddy. But if I had spent more time with Edward, right? No, Damien. He's Edwardian. He gets
he does get salty about Edwardian stuff.
That's why I'm like, why isn't Edward? It's also because it's Twilight.
That's why they did not call him Edward. I bet
if I had played and spent more time with him, I may have caught the binder reference. But I like that effectively they didn't drop the dead name, they didn't drop a surgery date.
Yeah, I didn't want
the
that.
Typical reveals.
No.
So I can appreciate that it was more like a quotidian daily life thing. I would have also been better maybe if they had like T-shots, because that's a more explicit reference where it's like, oh, I have to go pick up my prescription for testosterone. That's pretty clear about what's going on there. So that could have been the other option. But
yeah, at least they didn't do the bad things. They didn't fall into those bad tropes.
Yeah, let's do the Buffalo Bill dance in front of the mirror. Like, that's how we know.
Yeah.
I have written so many papers on Buffalo Bill and that dance that it's just imprinted in my brain at this point.
I am grateful they didn't do that as well.
Play Goodbye Horses just over the Hot Topic PA.
God, thank God they didn't do that.
Would you date me? I'd date me.
Well, there is a secret ending, right?
Oh, thankfully Damien's
Where's
not
the
in
skin
it.
suit? Made into a skin suit. That's how the end. The
Actually, the worst thing to happen with Damien is that you break his gargoyle.
That's a thing?
Yeah, you knock over his gargoyle and
of course you break a gargoyle. Like
I was so sad. I was like, oh, and I almost failed that, actually, because I barely got it back together before Damien came back out inside, broken his gargoyle. But yeah, I would have absolutely hated it if they had done bad trope, and it is a huge relief that they did not do that. And I mean, that does show some inclusivity in their writing team that they knew not to do that. But there were a lot of ways they could have done a little bit more to make it more clear. And maybe they don't need to make it clear, like we said.
Again, it's clear for the demographic that's playing it, who know what a binder is, that it's one of those terms that are community based. So it's like, oh, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah,
you can figure it out.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of this is because there are so few LGBTQ games available that maybe there is a lot of expectation maybe placed on this one, so that if there were more available, that we wouldn't say, well, we want to see this and we want to see this, because there would be other opportunities to say, well, there is. I'm thinking of like Lim, if you want to have that kind of experience, there is that game that you can turn to. So maybe it doesn't have to be present in Dream Daddy, and Dream Daddy can be the dreamlike fantasy that doesn't have to deal with any of the sort of negative aspects of it. But there definitely, I think, should be games that dwell on these things, and that the player can choose, how deep they want to go into these topics.
Absolutely.
And it did get some criticism around the inclusion of the binder body for your dad. Because not all trans people bind, not all trans people, some bind, some don't, some have had top surgery, some haven't, all these different kinds of things. And so a lot of people were saying how am I supposed to be represented in this since I'm not a trans man who binds, right? But then it's that line of trying to signal that you are trying to be inclusive and representative, but we also don't have enough games like this that give the different options. There isn't a game where you can play a trans man who doesn't bind. There's just this game. Yeah, it's this is just the one that exists.
The burden of representation falls very, very heavily on this game. And I mean, there are other queer dating sims and queer games and things like that. Obviously, it's not like it's Dream Daddy or nothing, but this was a really popular one. But with its popularity comes the fact that a lot of people who played it aren't queer. A lot of people who played it are heterosexual women. And there's a lot of ways that I think this game was designed specifically to appeal to heterosexual women.
You mean the kids in particular?
Yeah.
Because that's another trope that comes up in LGBT romance all the time. If you have a child on the cover, in the same way that they put Fabio on the cover to entice in women, the shirtless guy, put a kid on the cover and it entices people in more. And I was thinking about this on the way over here because I'm trying to figure it out. What is the kid signal? What does it mean? And I'm convinced to a certain extent, at least in the LGBT romance, it signals a late in life coming out, which effectively means that most people come out in their teenage years, but you also can't sexualize the teenage years without being creepy. So having a kid in the mix signals maybe he's in his 30s, 40s, so you can sexualize that body easier and still have this kind of coming out narrative, because the coming out narrative is the fun narrative because it's the first time, the first love story.
It's extra interesting that we very explicitly don't have that here. Yeah. And I think we talked about this a little bit, Matt. The appeal of dad and daddiness in the gay community is something very different than it is to heterosexual women, or maybe to gay women.
Yeah, this game definitely saw me and validated me in a very new way, but also left me very unrepresented in the sense that when what I see and what I perceive as a daddy in queer culture is not the same as what a heterosexual woman would perceive as a daddy, and why that would be enticing for them.
Yeah.
And this game was definitely meant to be consumed by queer people, but also not in the same way. It was definitely marketed in this in-between space.
Yeah.
That left me wanting in some areas. All the dads are bisexual, essentially. Yeah, and I definitely felt that my experience and the way that they presented daddy was not necessarily my expectations going into that game. I didn't expect all the dads to have kids. I didn't expect them to all either be widowed or divorced or something. And so that was not jarring, but definitely I was a target audience for this kind of game, but I wasn't the only target audience. And I think that comes out in the interactions and the inclusion of children, what you were talking about.
They took steps to make sure that the kids all looked like their dads. So these are all biological children, with the exception of yours. You have the option of having adopted Amanda. But otherwise, all of them are very clearly biologically theirs, so that means at one point they're all bisexual, right? Nothing wrong with that.
It just seemed like an interesting corner to paint yourself into intentionally. You could have done any of this in any way, shape, or form, and your audience would have been totally willing to go with you and not question the biology or any of these things, and yet they still felt the need to sort of show the provenance of the child in every case. And I didn't really need that. And they didn't need to all be dads. I was okay with. I didn't pursue Robert, so I don't really know what the background is there.
I was just about to ask, what does Robert's kid look like? Because I didn't pursue that either.
She's in her 30s. Yeah, she's much older. They have a very bad relationship.
Of course they do.
Robert is the Robert is the oldest of the daddies you can date, and she's the oldest daughter.
See, I wouldn't have guessed that Robert was the oldest. just looking at what they all look like, because that would have been another thing that I would have wanted to see, is just an older daddy.
Robert's the oldest daddy.
Yeah. I want to see gray hair.
Yeah, I could have gone for that.
Because I made my daddy with gray hair.
Yeah.
I was just like, no, beer belly, gray hair, the most dad I could think of.
The daddiest of dads.
We need more Timothy Dalton in this game.
Wouldn't hurt. What it felt like to me by having all the dads being like clearly coded as bisexual was, to this perceived heterosexual female person, it's almost like an availability gaze to make you not feel bad for finding these men desirable. And it's interesting, the only character that you don't get like a glamour shot of is you, and you're the only one who has the option of actually being gay and not bi. So I mean, it's creating an attractiveness to a perceived potential straight woman playing this game. I was uncomfortable, like I am queer as all hell, but I felt really weird playing this game because it felt like it was not for me in several ways. One of them, it felt like it was not for me because I'm not a straight woman, and the other way it didn't feel like it was for me was because I'm not a gay man. So it was just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, like, but I like it here.
It's like Alice through the Looking Glass.
Yeah,
I don't know where this is or where I am.
Yeah, and it was uncomfortable at times, and sometimes my happiest moments in this game were actually my interactions with my daughter. I know, weird.
Definitely. Like, especially in like the later playthroughs that I was doing, I was way more interested in my daughter than the dads, because that was like something, you know, I was a gay dad, make all the choices that my dad would be gay.
I was too.
Yeah, exactly. And then like, this is my lovely daughter. And then there's all these other dads that I can't relate to, and I can't relate to their stories of being like widowed and divorced and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also,
or still
Amanda's
married.
just great.
Oh, I know, Amanda's amazing. I love her. Like, I thought those pieces of dialogue were just so endearing and well written and way more on point than anyone is ever with their child. When I was playing it, I'm like, I'm a great dad. That's never going to happen, you know?
That you know of.
That's true. I mean, I don't. I could, but it's not a life choice for me, I don't think. And that's.
I was gonna say I was not as invested into the parental role.
That's interesting.
I admit. I think probably because, like, again, I was going in and being super aggressive with Brian the whole time. I think I was just kind of
more eggplants.
More eggplants. I'm going to be a neglectful father. Apparently, this is revealing parts of myself that I apparently only let out in private.
I'm very interested in these parts.
Where I'm just mean. Like, or I just was clicking through some of her dialogue where I'm like, yeah, you didn't get into school. That's fine. You'll be fine. I'm a horrible person.
Meanwhile, we're in academia, and if our parents like reacted that way, we would be crushed.
And they think my mom is not actually that accepting of like my area of research. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where she likes the fact that I'm going to get a PhD, but like if I talk about my research, she's just like, ugh.
Yeah.
So I'm like, weird escapist fantasy where I'm like, what is it actually like to be this crappy of a parent?
Just ignore my child's interests. Let them have their interests safely away from me.
They should have had that as an option. Ignore.
Social services come in, take your kid away.
Well, and that was another interesting thing, that Amanda is 18.
She's so self-sufficient. That's another thing. I'm like, right, she's 18, of course. But she looked like she was 14 at first. And then I was like, okay. But also, yeah, she's an adult. She's fine.
Yeah. I still was like, I can't leave my daughter home alone. She was older than most of the other daughters. And I was like, when I was 18, I would not have gotten along with this many younger children. I still wouldn't get along with this many other children. I am not a motherly sort. I see kids, I'm like, let's go the other direction. Oh my God.
See, I like kids in real life.
And see? Okay.
I know. This is the thing. I hang out with my partner's nieces and nephew all the time. And like his niece saying that I was funny, it still makes my year.
That's cute.
Like I'm funny to a 4-year-old.
I'm
all
just
I
like,
need.
I don't know how to talk to children. And I'm just like, so you're a small person.
You talk to them like mini adults. Like I went and when his twins weren't sharing, so I just was basically talking about Marx to them. Like, you're the capitalist, Lucy, and what we need is actually just, you need to share your resources.
How did that go over?
Oh, it was fine. Fine. They remember nothing when they're that age, so it's fine.
That you know of.
That I know of. Oh, I know. If they're going to have therapy at some point, it's because of conversations I've had. Introducing Baudrillard. This is not real. This is a photo of your mother. It is not actually your mother.
Oh boy. See, Amanda never does anything like that with the kids. She just does like whatever is perfectly natural. I have no idea. I was actually kind of jealous of her ability to like get along with kids throughout.
But I was going to say, in the same way that we're kind of, it ignores the kind of queer history, it's ignoring the difficulties of parenting.
Yeah.
And like, especially single parenting. Like, this is insane. She's basically a mini adult. Like, this is the most perfect human. I was a wreck at 18. Like, I wasn't this, like, especially not getting into a school. She's upset, but she's not like running off and getting a tattoo or running off with a boyfriend on the back of a motorcycle. Like, there's actual conflicts that kids have at that age. And she's just disappointed, sad, sighing a lot, but she's mostly like fine.
It might have been difficult if they had shown problematic relationships between the parents, because the politics of saying queer people don't know how to be parents would have been so toxic that
is so that fantasy space still really does need to exist in that.
Well, I mean, like, Hugo has a difficult relationship with Ernest, his son, because Ernest is a little shit pile. I mean, he's misbehaving all the time, and he's mean, and he's just a mean kid, and you know, he can get a dog and become a better child. But so I mean, not all of them are great parents, but you always are. Even at your worst, your world's okayest dad.
Even when I was picking the worst options, I was still doing fine.
Yeah, you can't do it wrong, actually, because the game writes the right
responses. I was like, I'm a great dad, but it also was like,
I'm a mediocre dad.
Yeah, world's okayest dad.
World's okayest dad. I love it. I want that mug.
Isn't that the achievement you get? World's okayest dad? Whatever.
I don't believe you get scored by Amanda at the end, although that feels like a missed opportunity.
You don't get scored, but there are achievements. You get like a bad dad one, and then there is a good dad one or something to that effect. Yeah. If she's happy at the end, there's something, like you get something for that.
I've not gotten anything but the happy Amanda ending. I meant to be a bad dad when I was dating Joseph, because I already felt like a bad dad for dating Joseph, but I just love Amanda. Joseph. I was not looking forward to that. I know none of you dated him, but it was bad.
I was going to say, I almost did, just because it's bad.
It's bad.
I like picking the aggressive options and the worst options, just to see what happens.
I mean, he's in the middle of a troubled marriage, so yeah, insert hot dad.
I'm pretty sure when I was like researching afterwards, just reading the summary, somebody called him Mike Pence, and I lost my mind.
Yeah, I can see that.
The best thing ever.
Like, not only was I like really not attracted to him, like as a character model or a character, like I was just like, I'm dating him for the research. I was really salty about it. But then, like, what happens in his story, I was just like, really?
Well, it's really not a good treatment of
anybody,
especially of like Mary, his wife.
Can we talk about Mary?
I only met her at the bar once, I swear.
That's kind of like what we're getting at, though, right?
Oh, is that the only time you ever get to see her again? Or?
No,
she pops up a little bit, but it's always in a way that makes her look bad and makes her as a female character look bad in this queer fantasy thing. It's like, women are bad.
Any of the criticisms that you looked up, did that kind of get addressed at all?
In the sense of like just pointing at it and being like, women are gross in like queer like stuff.
Because that's like one of the main criticism launched against LGBTQ romances. Because again, you're looking at a lot of people who have been married before, and some of them have wives, and some of them like basically treat women like crap.
Yeah.
In LGBTQ romance.
I think the only, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, internet listening, I think the only ones who really talk about their wives a lot, or their wives come up, obviously Joseph does. And then Craig does. He says, Smashley took the kids because he, that was her nickname in college. Apparently you, as your dad avatar, whatever. I'm not sorry. You knew her and Craig in college or whatever, and that was her nickname, and apparently Craig still calls her Smashley, even though her name is Ashley, even into adulthood and marriage and divorce. But, like when you go camping, Smashley takes the kids. But you're still calling her Smashley.
That could be good or bad, though.
Yeah, I mean,
like smashing.
But the reference is definitely booze.
Okay, that's fair.
And like Mary is drinking pretty consistently. When you date Joseph, she gets in your face and is like, he doesn't even like you. You're not even his type.
Well, and all the other female characters are dead.
Yeah,
because all the
except
dads
for
are,
children,
like, widows. Yeah,
it's more convenient that way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They're not obstacles to be dispatched with.
Matt talks about having like a really loving, good relationship with his wife, but she's dead. Everybody's dead.
This is also something I found getting outside the game in Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah.
That the treatment of, or the depiction of women in that is typically as obstacles to be sort of navigated around in order to allow for a queer romance to take place. And that it does create this hostility towards females in these narratives because they represent this heteronormative
block.
And you almost find yourself saying like, oh, if you would just sort of
Not.
not be here, this would be great. Although the mother in that movie was really well done, so it kind of balances out. But there's like a scene where the guy is on a sofa and he's being pampered by two women that he doesn't really give a shit about, and has sex with one of them and then just like never calls her again. And we're supposed to find this kind of endearing.
Have you read the book?
I've read portions of it.
It's a little bit more tempered in the book.
Okay.
A little bit, but not. I actually really liked Call Me by Your Name.
I loved it.
I thought it did a really good job, actually, kind of talking about temporality in terms of queer romance, because sometimes they just end.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to end horribly. They don't have to end wonderfully. Sometimes they just end, and I kind of like that one just ended. And then nobody died. It's in the 1980s. Nobody got AIDS.
Wait for the sequel.
Don't talk to me about the sequel. I'm just mad about that. Anyway, no, but this happens all the time though. With the women are just obstacles in a lot of these gay romances. I really shouldn't say LGBTQ romances because it's getting better now.
Okay, that's good.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of publishers that are deliberately trying to weed out this kind of almost old world mentality where women are just obstacles. Mm-hmm. But I'm convinced that this is kind of why lesbian romance and gay romance never shall meet.
Yeah.
Because you kind of get this Herland space with Radcliffe where this hospital is all lesbians, and then this kind of cul-de-sac in Dream Daddy where it's like they're all dads and all the women are dead. So have fun.
Except for the mean drunk one who's not that mean when you hang out with her.
Who's there to speak for all women who are still alive.
Yeah.
Apparently,
yeah.
Mary also is great, though.
She
love Mary, despite how they tried to portray her as like horrible.
If you don't date Robert, you don't ever really get to meet her, though.
Yeah, and if you do date Robert, she's like,
she's funny.
She's like your best bud.
Yeah, she's
like
funny.
Your wing woman.
There's a part where you're trying to get Robert alone, and if you say anything except I want to be alone with him, she gives you so much shit. She's like, why don't you just fucking say it? And then she just goes off and does what she wants, which is she goes to flirt with somebody. But the other thing that bothered me about how she's portrayed is like she's being driven to flirt with other men other than her husband because, her husband had an affair with Robert. And she knows about it, and that's what she means when she says, oh, you're so not his type. I think she should just be able to go flirt with people because she fucking can. But the other thing that bothers me about it is that the way it's always perceived as like, ew, get away from me. Like when she does flirt with men. She comes on too strong, or she's too drunk, or she's just like, nobody wants her, Nobody reciprocates any of her attention except for Robert, who, that's platonic though. So they were mean to Mary. It makes me sad. I didn't really know what to do with that as I was playing. Found the scenes with Mary were kind of the hardest to decide what to do.
Ooh. Can I jump in with a random thing? Because it just occurred to me that effectively the given assumption for most of these relationships is monogamy. And it would have been really fun if you could just date all the daddies. I'm sitting here right now.
Yep.
But it also helps you negotiate what to do with the wife.
Yep.
Like the wives or the people who, they don't all have to be dead.
Yeah,
if you just basically introduce the polyamory option where everybody gets to date.
I was wishing that was in this game, honestly, especially when it came to Joseph, because I think there are only 2 daddies that you date where the relationship does end at the end of the game. And that's Robert. If you tell him to get a shit in line, he says, like, I need to spend some time on me before I can actually be in a relationship. And in that good ending, he breaks up with you and you're happy for it and you're still friends and it's all okay. It just ends because it does. And it's okay. But there's the 2 different versions of the ending with Joseph, apparently. And in the good ending, the air quotes good ending, he breaks up with you and gets back with Mary after having this. I'm not even going to go into the yacht date, but in the quote unquote bad ending, you stay with him. And it's just like monogamy. Monogamy's confusing.
Monogamy's only confusing insofar as it's so invisible.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, where it's just like, it's this assumption throughout the entire game that you have to end it this way. And there are some, I don't actually know for dating simulators if you're allowed to do polyamory options, because I don't really play a lot.
You should.
You should.
I think you should.
Because there's like romance novels now where polyamory is a total option, and it's effectively just a bunch of people trying to figure out how to make this work, and there's a lot of chain emails.
I would read the hell out of that.
I will hook you up.
Thank you.
Afterwards.
Thank you.
Even in coming out on top, you kind of have to focus your attention on one partner, and it does bracket off the other characters, the other the more erotic dating simulator.
So the one I should have played.
I
didn't play that
actually stopped playing Dream Daddy to go play Coming Out on Top. It was more my scene, I guess.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. I'm just like, the sex in this is just, I see a glimpse of underwear. That's fine.
Non-existent,
I guess this is fine.
Well, that's another way it was very for like a straight woman's eye.
And also, you don't have to negotiate genitals in terms of trans men. Because that's a huge thing with that. That's one of the reasons why a lot of gay men won't deal with trans men, is they don't know how to deal with vaginas.
Sorry.
Sorry. Your giggle was just so...
I know. I was going to say, well, a lot of straight women don't know how to deal with vaginas either.
That's fair.
It's not that they're complicated. It's just they're under discussed, we'll say. And they're under talked about. So a lot of straight women don't know what to do with a vagina either. But that's why I was giggling. I'm sorry.
No, I like this. This is a good conversation.
And you two are both like, can we not?
I have nothing to add to this discussion about vagina.
No experiences.
I think there's enough men talking about vaginas. It's time for vaginas to speak for themselves.
Terrifying. I'm pretty sure I saw that film too. Isn't it teeth?
Yeah, I was like, it's teeth.
That's teeth.
And they bite. That's what vaginas, when they speak for themselves, do. They bite. Fuck you. Anyway. I do want to
vagina monologues. This is just... I'm sorry. You shouldn't invite me on this.
No, we should. You should be here more. You mentioned that the sex in Dream Daddy was not so satisfying, and you said it wasn't your scene, but you said daddies are good, right?
Oh, daddies are very good.
So I'm curious, what did you make of the sex in this?
Well, there wasn't any.
Okay.
And that was a missed part. It was great talking to them and dating them, but there could have been more, because daddies are good.
So in coming out on top, though, which is I'm not made of money. It was $30. I don't have $30.
I got it on sale for $20, but it was still a lot of money.
I would have paid $20, but I don't have $30.
And it was for research, damn it.
Well, I know.
You can write it off on your taxes.
I'm doing that now.
Yeah, you totally can. It counts for research.
That one does have the sex in it, though. Like, that doesn't just kind of cut you out, when the going gets good there, right?
Well, the sex is that you're rewarded with a graphic sexual image. And that's the sex. And I was hoping that there would have been more interactive elements.
That's interesting. And that also, you have that kind of reward image in Dream Daddy, but it's just shirtless, except for Damien. That was the other big hint to me, which made me sad. I was like, I want a sexy binder picture.
Well, that's the thing. And also, just take off his top then. It's a different context. The nipples in that context are not breasts, then they're pectoral muscles. It's all about context in that scenario. So just get over it.
Yep. That's the TLDR of it. But the fact that you didn't get the same kind of glamour shot of Damien, I was like, I'm disappoint. Either way, you're being rewarded for being a good dad or a good guy with sex. Your reward is sex picture. There's a whole lot of heterosexual games like that where you get rewarded with a sexual image for having done the thing, but typically it's a naked lady.
Yeah, I felt complicated playing it sometimes. I also found the writing in that, because it's an erotic simulator, and I did find a lot of the writing very erotically charged, and so there were, interesting passages that would occur, and so, you could play it for just the pleasure of the text at that point that you're having, and not necessarily needing the reward image.
I found I was really uninterested in the reward images in Dream Daddy. It's not just there was no sex, I wish there was sex. It was more just like, oh, here's a picture, I guess I'm done dating them. Like, the interactions were what were interesting in Dream Daddy to me, not the very limited descriptions of sex.
Yeah, it was definitely felt more gratification, like having that final scene with like the cherry blossom tree and like everything like that was very like nice. And then it was like like the credits image basically.
Yeah.
Which was like a nice thing, but ultimately I was way more interested in having a nice ending to those stories. And yes, there was a lot of fade to black and like that kind of thing, and like no sex whatsoever. And maybe that could have been nice, but also this was more a game about those interactions.
That was also the thing that I found strange, because what I think I was responding to in coming out on top so much is that there were interactions between the bodies and the conversations, and that there was, he places his hand there, and so you got a sort of situated bodies constructed through the literature itself. There's not actually being shown where the postures are, but in Dream Daddy, I didn't get the sense of any sort of placement in the space, the constructed space of the game. And so I think there could have been moments where you do get the sense of your character being present with, and not necessarily in a sexual context, just holds your hand or touches you, or your knees brush together or something, which is a lot of the descriptions that were coming out on top, which I really enjoyed reading. Also because in neither of these games do you see your character in the same screen space with the person that you're romancing. So for coming out on top, they tried to get around that through text.
Yeah, you only see your poorly rendered character in Dream Daddy next to their beautifully rendered, dream daddy body.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then like there was like a lot of like physicality, and like I found Craig's one when you're camping and you're doing the whole like waterfall jumping swimming stuff, but like in Robert's and in Damien's there's a lot less. I found like it's mostly like two dads talking back and forth, like that kind of thing, like you're across the room almost.
I feel like you get slammed into a wall and kissed in Robert's, but I mean
but it's also, you don't even see a scene at that point.
No,
it's
you
just
don't.
black.
Yeah, it
so
is.
like there's not even like a background image to give you an idea.
Yeah. Is that kind of a desexualization of dads?
I think it's more of a kind of modification of romance to a certain extent, because it's like, I completely agree with you. I didn't play Coming Out on Top, but there's a lack of physicality in so much of Dream Daddy, because it's not about physical bodies. And you can really see that again with, he's wanting to call him Edward, but he's not. It's Damien. Damien, like not showing him with the shirt off. And the things that signify trans identity in this are actually not bodily whatsoever. They're objects.
Yeah.
Binders. And there's the dates that they go on. They're very much, again, quantification of emotion. It's not necessarily like the physicality of emotion. Like you don't get to hold hands. And that's just something I'm realizing now that is just so strange, because that is such a huge deal, and there's so many physical attributes that you can filter through and with text. And I want to play Coming Out on Top now, because I'm just like, yes, no, the pleasure of the text entirely. That's pretty much LGBTQ romances. That's why I read so many of them.
Yes.
Because they're talking about physical bodies a lot of the time. And you just don't get that in a lot of other kind of queerness. Is this kind of absent presence in so much literature.
This is kind of off topic, but kind of on topic. Did any of you die playing Dream Daddy?
No.
Because that's a physicality that surprised me in this game. You can die on 2 of the dates.
What? Which dates?
Well,
what decisions?
If you get too aggressive on the
Brian?
Ferris wheel, with Brian, you can follow the Ferris wheel and die.
What? Okay, well, apparently I was not aggressive enough.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's this like, I hope my daughter doesn't see my mangled body.
What?
Yeah,
Does
I'm
it
not
say
kidding.
that?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes. So it's like the
How dare
physicality.
they deprive me of sex then, but then introduce death? How dare they?
I know.
That is not fair.
And then the other one is when you date Craig. When you're jumping off the waterfall, if you keep doing it, you can die on your date with Craig.
What does the screen look like? Is it
It
just
just
a
goes
bunch?
black.
That's awful.
Yeah.
How dare they deprive me of sex?
But they'll kill you.
But they'll kill me. This feels like some strange, like, is this like an analogy for homophobia now?
I don't know,
This
but that's
feels-
why I was like, it's not off topic, but it's not on topic, and I need to talk about this.
Gay
Please.
characters don't always have to die. Like,
Well, at least it's not like a random dude bro just coming out of the woodwork and
Yeah.
pushing you off the waterfall. It's
I
your
know.
own. It's your own stupid.
Yeah, you're like,
decisions.
I'm going to keep. Craig says, like, I'm
your dad
tired.
also
Let's
is
go back
very
to the camp.
stupid.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
But that's one of those strange things, is that they don't deal with homophobic violence, but they do deal with sort
Ferris
of
wheel violence.
Ferris caricatured violence. So I'm just trying to figure out the ideology at play in this, like what they will
this
show and
changes
what they
everything.
won't show.
Yeah.
Because I could understand if like, oh, it's a fantasy space. We're not going to confront death at all. No one's ever going to get an
Oh, no.
illness or any of
You
these
fall off the
things.
Ferris wheel. Or Craig says, I want to go back to the camp. And you're like, I must continue to jump. And you keep jumping and you die.
This is awful.
Mhm.
I ruined everything. Hooray!
Well, 'cause the whole point of a romance is effectively the happily ever after. Is nobody dies.
Yeah,
Nobody's
how is that
supposed to die.
satisfying? At least when like you get dumped at the end, it's like, oh, I did something wrong, or like this is what heartbreak feels like.
yeah,
but
and
like
that's still
I
satisfying.
just died. Like,
Yeah.
Well, that being said, with the Craig one, the reason why I didn't keep jumping off the waterfall, because I wanted to show Craig how like athletic I was by jumping off the waterfall, but then he seems kind of annoyed that I'm still jumping off the waterfall, and so he leaves, and so I was like, okay, I feel like he's not invested in this
in the waterfall
in this
showing
moment
off.
anymore, and so if I want to be on a good date, I should go follow Craig. So the game is kind of saying, if you don't listen to your partner,
Yeah.
you'll be rewarded with death
And
by
then-
waterfall.
That's, yeah, because on the date with Brian, it's when, I'm trying to remember the exact moment, but basically it's when you decide whether or not you're going to stop being an idiot and like trying to be so
Never.
hyper competitive. Like you both say like, yes, we'll still be kind of competitive. But if you get pissed and like you refuse to sit next to him or something like that, you fall out of the Ferris wheel.
Well, that wasn't happening.
Well, I know you didn't want to get away
I
with
think,
Brian.
I think that's why I also chose Brian, though, is he's just like this very physical presence.
He is.
So I think it was probably why I was just like, nope, him.
Again, in the meet cute, it's a very physical meet. Like, he hits you in
Yes.
the head with a frisbee. I thought it was so cute. And
I love meet cutes like that.
And the dog is great. Like, and you fall out of the boat on the date. I mean, there's more physicality there, but it's not.
Yeah, that's probably why I like this. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
This makes so much more sense now. Thank you for that. That was good.
Speaking of really violent endings in coming out on top, if you don't come out at the start of the game, it resets itself.
I like that.
And there's
That's
a little
fun.
blurb that says, here's why you don't get to continue playing this game, because you won't let my character come out.
I like that.
You have to do this.
Okay, so with the Ferris wheel, what happens is you can be honest with Brian, you can be honest with yourself, or you can be an asshole. And if you choose to be an asshole, the next option is be honest or throw a punch at Brian. And if you throw a punch at Brian, you knock your balance off and fall off the Ferris wheel.
Because like this is like the last date for Brian, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is this just because they weren't able to write like a breakup scene where Brian like confronts you at the barbecue? Because also that's the last date for Craig as well. So it's like, we don't know how to write like a breakup for this, so I guess you just die.
I don't know. Like, all the other daddies there weren't like breakups except for Robert and Joseph.
See, I would have just liked if every single date you could have died on.
I know, that would be much more satisfying, and
Yeah.
also that would be also deeply disturbing.
Love it.
It would be a good discussion about the
Love is dangerous.
It is,
Betsy.
but I mean also just like it's not always safe. Even
to date.
it's not always safe.
Your
in any,
grinder hookups could go very wrong.
yeah, and I mean again, this is our fantasy world, but not even in a fantasy world is it always safe. But in these cases, it's just be an asshole is the option. And then you die from Ferris wheel. It's weird. No sex, only death, and dreamy daddies. I think we are about out of time, though, and I feel like that's a good place to stop. We didn't talk about race representation.
Oh, yeah.
Which was
Oh.
something we could have talked about. But
Weird.
I was going to bring it up during that pause, and then I said it wrong, and then I was going to start, but then we had something else cool
I
to talk
said
about.
polyamory, and I
Nope, that was way good.
was gonna say I thought they did an okay job with race.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I was like,
And
I'm
that's like a thumbs up.
I say as a white person that
Yeah.
I actually, what did your Amanda look like? Does Amanda change?
She's always.
No, she's always okay.
Your partner is always like. There's that one picture of you and your
I forget,
partner,
yeah.
and she or he is always darker skinned and.
Because like
looks
I
more
made my
Amanda.
character darker skinned.
Okay. Oh, so you were. Not
I wasn't
sure.
ever actually sure if like that was like because I did that.
Yeah.
Or
No,
because the
she's
picture
always,
did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I made Garrett Hawk from Dragon Age 2.
Hilariously, Call Me by Your Name. I named my character the dad after Call Me by Your Name
He was
because
my
he implies
favorite
that he's gay.
character.
Yeah, because that the monologue is the best thing I've ever heard.
Yeah,
And that's verbatim from the book. Like, it's actually even longer in the book, and that was the entire reason why I wanted to watch the movie as I read it. And I was like, oh, my heart. Okay. But yeah, I made Sammy Perlman. That was my character. Because the dad. Why not? I'm playing Dream Daddy, and it's the dad from...
I picked Garrett just because he makes so many shitty jokes, and I was like, there's dad jokes.
I tried to make mine look like me, and I just ended up looking like some pompous ass. Maybe that's also why I wasn't really that invested. I was like, oh, it's Uncanny Valley. I don't like it.
Okay, all right. Are we running or not? Shit. That one's gonna go on the end of a podcast too, isn't it? Are we running? Shit.